Dads, do you want a thriving business that doesn't control you? A passionate marriage and kids that adore you? Do you want to grow deeper in your faith? Be healthier, both physically and mentally? Build more meaningful relationships with your friends? Welcome to the Balanced Business Dad Podcast, where in each episode we dive into balancing and optimizing the 6 pillars of life: faith, health, marriage, fatherhood, brotherhood, and business. And here are your hosts, pioneers of the Balanced Business Dad movement, Dustin Hogue and RJ Campbell.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Balanced Business Dad. I'm your host, Coach Dustin here, and with me, as always, my esteemed, very senior colleague, Mr. RJ Campbell. RJ, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. I've been esteemed before.
Yeah, a couple times.
Usually senior, but I got very senior today.
Oh, you're getting older.
I am getting older by the minute.
Yeah,
I'm outrunning him.
Awesome. So, guys, we are in for a treat today. We have a guest on the episode with us, Mr. Aaron Shelley. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'm assuming I did. But also the author of the book called The Family Flywheel. And I will let him explain kind of where he got that from. But I know if some of my listeners out there are like me, you've heard of the word flywheel before from other books. So we're just going to jump right into it because I know this is going to be packed with great information. So Aaron, just tell us a little bit about kind of who you are and what you're up to these days, and then how did we get here?
Well, so if I go back to kind of my high school, I was very athletic, and then in college, I did mechanical engineering because I love science and math. I love understanding how systems work. You know, I love there were some opportunities, to build some really cool stuff. And if you understand the physics, I like Elon Musk, and he can build rocket ships without physics. So I love that side of it, understanding how it works. Got a little frustrated with business people, so I went and got an MBA because I was like, I can be a great engineer, but if I have crappy business people, the business is still going to go out of business. So I did that, went into business because I'd read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Instead of following the normal trajectory after an MBA and going and working for a big company, I had opportunities at Intel or some up in like Schneider Logistics in Michigan. There were some of these big companies. My wife and I decided that she had been teaching some Irish dance classes. So we decided, and she was the only certified teacher in Utah at the time. So we decided to, instead of moving, we bought a house close by where we were at, and we opened an Irish dance studio behind the house. So,
which is what most engineers do. You get a mechanical engineering degree and an MBA, and you go into Irish dance. It's a good thing.
But it was a great synergy because of my wife did all the Irish dance. She knew all that stuff, the art stuff, and I knew all the technical, computery, anything we needed on that side. So it really worked out well, but it didn't take up my full time. So I went through, got a job at Ancestry.com. I was in their operations group for a number of years. Mm-hmm. Then I went to a genealogy startup. We burned through a lot of money in 3 years, didn't work out. And then because of how my wife and positioned ourselves, we'd gotten ourselves out of debt. And so at that point I had this opportunity, like, what do I want to do? And my mom happened to have this connection to a guy at a local university. He was writing a book on business and family. His focus was more on family businesses, but he was looking at entrepreneurship levels between groups. So I helped him with some research. And during the course of that, I said, hey, I think there's a better model than the one you're using in your book. And so I created this thing, wrote it all up. And he said, it sounds like you have a book. No, that's not mine. So I had no intention really of writing a book, but after going through it, I felt like the engineer side of me understood kind of what was going on. And there was one bigger event too that kind of prompted me to focus on the family. And I talk about it, if you've read the book, you see like my mom sent me an article that said a friend from high school, I hadn't seen him for 10 or 15 years. He had just been convicted of rape and attempted murder and was going to serve out the rest of his life in prison. And I thought, whoa, what the heck happened? We went to the same church. We went to the same high school. We played a lot of the same sports, same neighborhood. So we were close in terms of where we were on the path, and then they diverged so greatly. And I have 4 kids. So I was thinking, I do not want this to happen with my kids. So I want to understand what went wrong, how it went wrong, and how I can prevent this from happening to my family. So that was kind of the negative side of what prompted me to go and do that. So I kind of wrote up the book, the concepts and the major ideas. And then right before I was kind of in the publishing mode, I had an opportunity. A friend called me up and said, hey, you want to be the director of our development at the company? So I did that. Well, we had about 20 people. Fast forward, it's been 5 years now since I did that. The company grew to 180 people. We ended up getting private equity of $50 million. And then I had the opportunity to kind of step back, as well as a couple of founders. And so then I'm like, oh, now I have the time to get the book out, also to give back. So that's kind of the long and short. I've been through the hyper growth, 100% plus growing, what that required. And so that's kind of, you're always making some trade-offs. But through it all, my wife and I were running the Irish dance business and doing all this stuff. So kind of going around to a lot of different places.
And still have the Irish dance studio.
That. Yep. St. Patrick's Day is coming up. So
wow.
It's always a fun time of year.
Big
all
week.
The shows. Yep. It's always a lot of fun.
Yeah. I was surprised when you sent me the book or when we got it, because we've had other authors on, especially first-time authors. This is a big book. And I don't mean big like it's 1,100 pages, but this is not an 85-page book that you completed.
In retrospect, I should have made it a little shorter. And just because I'm the engineer, so I want to help everyone see all the parts, right? I'm like, if you don't take this piece into account, then you're not going to get good results, right?
Right.
And so that was really what I came down to. I got to show people how these things work in practice, how to make these things, how to make your family better, and all the different variables. Because I'm not trying to. The thing I feel like I've kind of touched on is we've spent hundreds of billions of dollars on business research, right? And we all know how to do that. And I think most men are like, I know how to do my business. It's what I'm great at. And so then they just spend most of their time. I go to business. I go do my business work. Look, I've made all this money. But we don't really have a good model for our families. And therefore, we're often neglecting pieces of our family, not intentionally. It's not like, well, I want to screw up my kids. Therefore, I'm just going to go to work all the time. It's like, I don't know what I should be doing. And so,
there's no manual.
Right. No manual, no instructions.
Especially when you have children, right? Then you're like, wow, no manual, especially.
Right.
So
we talk about that all the time. Yeah, they just hand you this thing and say, take it home and don't kill it.
So the big insight for me was kind of working in these places between business and this family research, and also having this prompt from this friend of mine. It was like, I kind of came into this weird space of pulling them together and probably getting some insights that you wouldn't get on either side. And I looked at it going, most people, especially men, a lot of women now are just in the business world. So we all kind of have this common language that we know how to speak, but we don't really still haven't transferred that over to family much. So
true.
Right?
I said so true.
So that's kind of the big insight for me. If I look at it, as I kind of thought through it, was if you look at a company like Google, they have a specific strategy, and their mission is to organize the world's data. Their strategy is we're going to spend most of our resources on software, those type of things. Their structure is we're not going to have a ton of managers. We want very smart people who can manage themselves, and we'll give people ownership in terms of stock equity. So there's a lot of different places there structurally. They try to have fewer meetings because of that. And then they have a culture of a lot of freedom and responsibility. If you could work best in the morning, great. 4 a.m., do your work then. You don't have to be doing stuff exactly the same. And that culture works for Google. And then if you look over at Walmart, it's the comparison. You look at Walmart, their strategy is, well, we want to provide high quality goods at low prices so that we can help families. And then you look at their structure. They have a lot of junior level people who need a lot of oversight. Each store has its own management. So there's a whole different structural element than Google has. And then if you look at their culture, it's not freedom and responsibility. It's like they value people being on time, in the right place, at the right time, getting the boxes on the shelves, doing what needs to get done. There's not this like, what I think I should be working on this section. No, we need you here now, right?
No.
But the thing that's interesting in both of those is those are both billion-dollar revenue companies, multiple billions, massively valuable companies, but they use very different business models, right? And so that's where I started to look at families. It's like, just like in a family, there's not a one right business model, right? If you were the breadwinner, your wife was the breadwinner, or if you want to be in tech, or you want to be a blue collar entrepreneur, or you want to be a superstar, all of those strategies have different consequences. And if you're aligned in your business model, you have a good culture that matches. Like if you want to be a doctor, you better have a culture of delayed gratification, right? You better believe in long-term investments, because you're going to be doing that for 9-10 years. Then you're getting into debt. I mean, the reality is you're probably not getting out of debt as a doctor till you're mid to late 30s, if that, right? And that's not even including your house, right? So this is this long-term, you have to have this long-term thinking and delayed gratification. But if you don't have that, which some people don't, you're going to end up in debt, dropped out of school. Your marriage prospects will be harder. Your life will just be harder because you chose a strategy that didn't have alignment with a culture, right? So that's the type of stuff that I see, like, or if you were like, I want to be a doctor, but I want to get married when I'm super young. Okay, and have kids when you're super, okay. Your structure and your strategy, they could work. Maybe if your wife was, you could maybe make it work, or maybe if you lived with your parents and, you know, do an extended family business model or a structure, as I call it. But you have to really think about the logistics of it, just like you do in a company, because if you're like, I get married young, I have 5 kids, and I want to be a doctor, and my wife's a stay-at-home mom. I don't know where the money's coming from. But then there are strategies where you could say, oh, I can go into the military, they'll pay for it, and then they'll forgive it after 4 years once I've gone through all the training. Oh, there's that strategy. And I had a friend who did that. So it's really trying to help people understand you need to get your business model aligned. And if you're out of alignment on your own business model, it's a problem. And as soon as you bring in another person into your family, they better have the same business model as you do, or complementary business model, because otherwise you're going to be having all sorts of conflict. Does that make sense?
It does. And I really like it, especially that part that you just said. They don't necessarily have to have the same business model, but they have to have a complementary model, right? That my wife and I are very complementary. We're definitely not the same, yet it's very complementary, where I wouldn't be successful without her. And that's what I think makes our marriage successful. So that makes a lot of sense. So
that's really true, by the way.
But this is an interesting
I've known him for a long time.
I think it's good to bring up. If you look at the dating market right now, you'll see people who are trying to date the same person as they are. I've seen so many women who are like, I'm an exec, I want to be top, I want to, keep pushing and have this great career, and I want to marry a guy who's the same. And then I said, do you want to have children? Well, yeah, I want to have children. Well, who's staying home with the kids? Well, he would have to stay home with the kids. Well, I don't know very many driven, super high executive guys who are going to sacrifice their career for children. So you're looking for this unicorn, right? Part of it, and I did some discussions with a couple of women in that exact position. And after I talked them through it, they're like, oh, I never thought about what I'm trying to do. And I never thought about it. That's why I can't find a guy, because as soon as I tell him what I'm trying to do, the guy's like, I'm out. Like later, this isn't what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Which going back to the business metaphor, when people are dating, it's very similar to trying to hire people, right? And if you look in business, the biggest mistake you ever make in business is hiring the wrong person, right?
Absolutely.
And look in life, the biggest mistake you'll ever make is marrying the wrong person. If you're not aligned, and so, but if you look at how much literature, again, we have on hiring practices and how to look for culture fit, how to put together a job description so you know what you're looking for, and then knowing what you're trying to do in the business. So here's what I'm going to do. Here's what they're going to do. We do that all the time in the business world. And it's like, it's brain dead. Like, of course you would do that. Why would you try to hire someone without a job description, without telling what to do? And yet you look at people when they go dating. Well, what are we going to do? I don't know. What are you going to do? I don't know. I haven't really thought this through. What are you looking for? I don't know. A girl? She's hot. Is she hot?
A girl.
Right.
Preferably hot.
Yeah.
So that's the type of stuff where I don't think we're looking well of like, I mean, when I've talked to people about the book, they're actually like, you should make a dating app, because it's really more like trying to find a founder in some way. Like you want, like you said about, you want to find someone with complementary skills. You don't want to find, like my wife and I, our business works well because we have complementary skills. And at times she's been like, you should learn how to do Irish dance, then you could teach the classes. And I'm like, yeah, no. 1, I suck. I know I suck. And 2, then we start to lose the specialization. And that's kind of the thing that I think is interesting is we need to look at our family from a specialization lens, because that's how businesses are most successful, right? If you're like, hey, I want to go and let's start a business. I want to be the sales manager. You want to be the sales manager. It's not going to work. But if I'm like, I want to do product and you want to do sales. Oh, this is going to work well. As long as I pull my part of the agreement, you'll pull yours. We'll both super appreciate each other. We'll both be super successful, right? So it's really that synergy and complementary skill set that we should be looking for in families versus trying to both do the same. And I need to make more money than she does, or she needs to make more money than I do. And who's the biggest and who gets to be the dictator, right? There's just weird stuff that's going on rather than being a collaborative family that's trying to achieve a common mission.
And do you touch on that in the book? Kind of that division of labor, specialization, that type of thing that goes on?
Yeah, that's partially why it's so big. Because I go through and I'm like, if you do not believe in specialization, then it's going to be a problem, right? If you went into a job interview and said, I'm going to give 50%, everyone would be like, cool, you're not hired. But so many people are now going into marriages. It's got to be 50-50. In what way? Is the guy working sales? That's a sucky job. I've done it. Cold calling, doing that. Is that the same as the guy banging his head against the wall trying to do development work? They both have their struggles. They both have their positives. We appreciate them both in the business world if we have a healthy company. But in our family, we often don't appreciate us. I've seen a lot of both sides, but a lot of men who won't appreciate the contributions that our wives are making. So that's the stuff. And that's partially what I try to do in the book. If you've read the book, The Rich Dad, Poor Dad, then he talks about the cycle of money, right? You have some cash flow, you buy some assets, you get more income, you have more cash flow. That's the flywheel effect that's going on. But there's another, and I did that. And then I made a really bad investment in 2007 in real estate. And I realized, I was going after the money, but I didn't take into account my mental health, my peace of mind as being a provider and a protector of my family. So when all of a sudden, what should have been a $50,000 to $60,000 upside turned into a $250,000 downside, I was like, I was only focused on the finances. And so what my wife and I at that point decided to do was we're going to pay off all our debt, which is every financial advisor will tell you it's a bad idea because you can always make more in the stock market.
Right.
But I had expanded it so I wasn't just focused on what I call a financial resource, right? Money, tools, property. I was now looking at social resources, my connection to my family, as well as what I call the human resources, my health, my time, and my abilities. So I was like, now I understand. I don't want to just, and every business sees this too. A business will take millions of dollars and buy a Super Bowl ad, right? Why? They're not buying, that act is not trying to get money. It is in the long term hoping to get money, but it's a short term thing to try to build a brand, right? And then they take that brand and then they hopefully build some products and then they try to sell it and then they make money and then they take that money and hire people. Then they have more abilities, right? So if you look at the resources, not just from a financial side, but from a financial, social, and human side, and then you start to understand in our families, historically, and I saw this with my mom, for instance, and the example is really when I got married, there were like 400 people who came to my wedding and I was going, who are you? I don't know who you are. You're giving me presents. You're supporting me in my marriage. Why? This is about me and my wife, and neither one of us know you. And they said, oh, your mom, she helped us get through this hard time in our life. Or your mom helped my son get his Eagle Scout. Or your mom did. I'm like, oh, this is all of the social investing that my mom had done in the community. And she continues to connect people when you have problems. She connected me to the guy who wrote the book, right? She had built all of these social connections similar to a company building their brand, building their individual connections and being involved in groups that I got to use then as her child, right? And so that's where you start to see most men, if you go to work, like the balanced dad, like you say, going to work, or being an entrepreneur and always working, I guess. That's how it feels sometimes. It's like you're only focused on that financial resource. You're not looking at, what about the social resources, right? For your family, because social resources tend to be very important for your mental health of your family, your wife. I mean, every time you move, it's very interesting. A lot of times the family has problems because they're not connected, right? And then they start to have mental health issues. They start to have all these other problems. And you're going, because you have no social resources that are sitting underneath it.
Yeah, that's the brotherhood aspect of the pillars that we talk about. There's so many that Aaron is talking about. They're just playing right into the 6 pillars that we talk about so much. And especially the fact that us entrepreneurs tend to focus on what we think is the least important of those pillars, which is business. Yeah.
Right.
And we make that first. And by doing that, we very successfully screw up our faith and our marriage and our kids, and we end up with no friends.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of...
So, yeah. And our health is horrible on top of that.
Well, and that's because you're sacrificing, right? You're sacrificing your health because we don't know any better. I think that's partially what I wrote the book about is, and there's a part in there where I talk about, I never knew this, but they said in the book, The Boy Crisis by Warren Farrell and John Gray, they talk about how if a father or if a child is raised without their father, like he's just gone all the time, or there's no father in the house, his IQ is 15 points lower. I mean, this is not small.
Wow.
I never realized the impact. And it's because a lot of times the dads are challenging. I talk about this. There's often a challenger in a family and a nurturer in the family. And the challenging, we all love, honestly, at least especially men, like we love to fight. We love to push. We love sports. Yeah. It's like, can I just see a good fight? Maybe it's a intellectual fight. We love conflict.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you want this, the dad is kind of this challenger often in the family who's pushing the kids, who plays with them. And they talk specifically, you play with your kids, but you kind of play with them on the edge of their abilities. You're always trying to push them, right? But sometimes in the course of them getting pushed, they get hurt. And then sometimes you'll have the mom who will jump in. Why did you hurt the kid again? Why are you doing that? And she thinks she's protecting the kid, but the kid actually likes being pushed. They just kind of need to be nurtured back so that they can continue learning, right? We all have this point where the challenge exceeds our abilities, and there's just places where you need that nurture. Even for me as an adult, when I hit that real estate hit, and I just was like, what am I doing? I'm a horrible husband. I had all these, I screwed so much up in my mind. And it was my social connections who kind of came. My wife's like, we'll get through this. And it only took us 6 or 7 years to dig out of the hole. And it actually made our marriage stronger because we were both on the same page. So that's where I think if you expand your vision of wealth, and for men especially, then you come home from work and you can go, hey, my wife has spent the last 8 hours, she's been investing in our children. She's been training our children, right? She's making those investments in human resources, just like an HR department would. What skills do they need? Oh, I took them to the park to socialize the kids, right? And then you also see, and then I went and talked with these people, and I connected with people in our church or at a sports group or at the children's stuff. And if we see it broadly, you're like, oh, she was investing, but she's like the marketing department. She invested, she got social return. She didn't put numbers in the bank account, but now she has more connections for our family. And now we're richer, but in a different way.
Love that. Absolutely.
Great. Yeah, we break the family down into what we all understand more, which is the business side of it.
Right.
Which should be, we would be doing it the other way around, because we should understand our families more than we understand business. But it's easier for us to equate the different departments of our companies.
Yeah, and I think
families.
it's a little bit around, there's been I think historically, my grandfather was a farmer. He did potato farming in Idaho. He needed a farmer's wife. He needed someone who could shear the sheep and birth lambs and do this type of stuff. So if he had married some very attractive but woman who was from a city who didn't want to do that, it would have been a catastrophe, right? So historically, I think we did view this much more like we were in this together as a family. And I think we've kind of had this period of time since about the 1930s forward, where now it's like, well, we can both do the same things and everything can be equal. And you're like, no, there's still things like, as much as I want to, I can never birth a child. I'm sorry. Like there's some things that are just limited by gender. And so then you start to look at specialization based on, okay, well, if you're going to invest in the kids, literally growing them, and then you need to nurture them, well, then I should probably specialize not in that area. I should specialize over here. And then at some point, like my wife and I don't want to be pushing like, oh, you should have the stay-at-home mom only, because my wife's worked. But she made it, her work was at night. And so she would have the kids during the day. I would come home, I would have them at night and have the time to play with them. And it wasn't intentional, but I go back with that thing about the IQ points. And he actually says there's about 50 different things that not having a dad has negative implications on our children. But I don't think as men, we know that, right? There's self-esteem, there's skills, there's a whole bunch. And I don't list them all in the book, but it's just like, we don't know that as husbands. So we're like, I know if I make money, I'm helping the family. And the saddest example I can think, there was this man who worked well. He built a company up. He ended up dying of a heart attack, left $200 million to his family. And his daughter, because he didn't straighten everything out, but his 18-year-old daughter ended up getting $20 million. And everyone goes, oh, I'd be so great. Look at all the resources I would have. Those financial resources, amazing. Well, she's on her 4th marriage or 5th marriage, I think now. She's bought and sold companies and destroyed them. She's had to borrow more money from her mom. And so you look at this, like, we've been focused so much on the resource of money. Like, I want to be rich. We're not thinking I want to be someone who generates wealth, right? And I want to have a family that generates wealth. And that's where, going back to what you alluded to on the flywheel from the book Good to Great. This is the flywheel effect we can get in our families if we focus on the business model, because that's really the generator of the wealth, right? If you have millions of dollars, it's not because you just have them. The resources were created by something.
Right. You generate it.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where we see the disasters with second and third generation family businesses, where, there was passion in the first generation and maybe even in the second one. By the time it was the third generation, it was just money. And we see where that, or what we talked about a lot, lottery winners. Yeah. Massive wealth. Hey, you just got $400 million. We've got the over-under on 11 years before you're broke.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
We're putting money on it. But it's same thing. They don't, it's not generated. It's just given. And then you don't know what to do with it. It's not generating more.
Well, and this is, if you go to the Bible, this is the, teach a man to fish or give a man a fish and feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. That's kind of the same thing where if we focus on the business model, and frankly, if you look at it and say, I have no money in the bank, I don't have good relationships or whatever, you'd say, if we were in business and you had a restaurant no one wants to go to and you're losing money every month, we would say, you have a crappy business model, right? You need to fix something.
Right.
You need to change something. That's what you see on these shows like Kitchen Nightmares. Gordon Ramsay will go in there and you're doing too much, simplify, do da-da-da-da-da. And then it goes well because they fixed the business model. But people don't sit there and go, well, I don't have money in the bank. Well, it's just because I'm poor. That's because someone else. And then they play these victim things. And it's like, no, it's because you have a crappy business model, right? You don't invest your time and your health and your abilities well. And that's what's so fascinating. If you look at the number of immigrant entrepreneurs or, second generation immigrant where you're like, they didn't have extra money. They had work ethic. They had a culture that was driving towards certain things. They had a family that supported it. And then they were pushing in the direction that was useful. One of the examples I talk about in the book, and I think it's probably one of the better ones. So Bill Gates' mom, Mary Gates, I don't know, most people haven't heard of her. So his dad, William Gates Sr., he was a lawyer. The mom was a school teacher. They got married, and then she taught school for a few years, had 3 children, and then she dropped out of the workforce, focused on her family. The dad became an entrepreneur. Well, he opened a law firm for himself. So there's kind of the entrepreneurial side where I think you would have got that to Bill Gates. But then his mom was investing in the children. Then she started to, once they got older, she started to volunteer in the community. United Way was the one where she got connected to the CEO of IBM. And Bill Gates, so when Bill was talking with IBM, the CEO's like, oh yeah, I know who that guy is. That's her son. And you look at that and you go, it's hard to unravel anything, but that could have been a $50 or $100 billion relationship.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so you'd look at that and be like, if if she had been like, oh, my kids are out, I'm going back to school and I'm teaching to make my whatever, $30,000, $40,000 a year, the family as a whole would actually be much poorer because they didn't holistically invest. Just like a company, if they said, we're not going to have a marketing or sales thing, cool. You're not going to have a very successful company, even if you have the greatest product. You have to invest in marketing and sales. So that's kind of the relationship I see in the families is a lot of times men will be like, well, I can see my bank account. I can see my pay stub. I'm bringing home the money. And the wife's like, yeah, I'm doing all this other stuff. It's just not easily quantifiable.
Right.
Track.
Yeah. Yep.
Man, this is good stuff.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. Somebody who is in business so much and I've never really looked at it this way, yet it makes so much sense, right? And to have those departments and to work it like a business. I've always said that things should be worked like a business, but man, when you really look at it and the other resources besides financial resources, how important those are. Mary Gates has set up the Gates family forever, right? Forever.
By volunteering at the United Way.
Yeah.
And meeting somebody.
So just as I thought, this conversation has taught me a lot and opened my eyes, and I can't wait to dive into the book myself. So guys, check out The Family Flywheel by Aaron Shelley, because this is a very interesting way to look at our family dynamics, right? And to see what we can do better, see how, again, we can just, our goal here is to get better every day. And I feel like this book's really going to help us with that. So, Aaron, where can they find the book? How can they find you? Yeah,
the book, it's got the circle on it. That's trying to show the cyclical nature. So it's on Amazon. I have a website, thefamilyflywheel.com, with some templates, some forms that'll and a spreadsheet or a slideshow that'll help you go through your business model. It'll ask you the prompts. How should you go through that? And if you take it with your wife, you can do one and then you have your wife do one. And then you can look across those and be like, are we out of alignment? Because most of the arguments you have are not big arguments, are going to be around alignment issues, right? So I have that on the website. I have a blog. You can find me on Facebook, Aaron K. Shelley, or also on LinkedIn at Aaron K. Shelley.
Well, this will,
and then if you want to email me, aaron@thefamilyflywheel.com.
Perfect. Well,
love to help out in any way I can.
Thank you so much. That will all be on the show notes, guys, because I think this is one that we just really all need to study this book together. I'm super excited about this. I'm super excited about jumping in. Thank you so much. Guys, again, our goal is just to be better every day. So RJ, close us out and tell them how we can help with that.
Yeah. So easy way to find us. We have a free Facebook page, or Facebook group, I should say. Thank you. That's coincidentally is named The Balanced Business Dad. So if you search The Balanced Business Dad on Facebook, you'll see the group there, and ask to be invited in, and we will accept that. And we probably have 300 and some, I assume mostly guys, but people that are on there. We also have a men's mastermind, which we refer to as the Dad Up Council. So you can actually find that on the website, thedadupcouncil.com. Get some more information there on things that we have coming up and what we're doing there. And of course, I also like to remind everybody to help us out, help the podcast so that other people can find it. Just give us a rating. Wherever you found this, Google, Spotify, wherever, Apple, wherever you're listening to it, rate the podcast. It helps it get seen out there so other people can find us.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. That's what we have. We're going to be on the lookout for the next Balanced Business Dads Retreat, first weekend of May in beautiful Lesterville, Missouri, which is a town of about 7. But I personally own a campground there, so we have a retreat twice a year down there, and it's going to be good. So be on the lookout for that. It'll be 30 guys really diving deep into all the pillars together. So that's what we have tonight. We'll see you next week, and just stay balanced out there, guys.
Talk to you then.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.